It's spooky season, so my next tweet sounds eerily perfect for the season. No more ghoulish, libertarian, zombie Hayekianism, but a positive vision of the whole. What the hell are they talking about? This tweet over the weekend sparked quite a backlash when someone gave a lecture on the new right, as they call themselves. The new right is a public orientation to God, an ecumenical integralism. Those are some big words. No longer slashing government. Since when have we slashed government? But use it for the good of the family and the nation. And finally, this no more ghoulish libertarian zombie Hayekianism, but a more positive vision of the whole. Boy, that's a big word salad. And quite frankly, I don't feel like going on a diet. Let's get my buddy in here. He's Vance Ginn. He's a former top economist in the White House under Donald Trump and a senior fellow at Young Americans for Liberty. He's joining us on the line right now. Good morning. How are you, Vance?
Hey, good morning, Austin. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm doing well. Get excited to talk about these spooky topics.
Yeah, very, very spooky. Ghoulish zombie libertarianism. No more slashing government. I don't know what the hell he's talking about here. Vance, can you decode this for us?
Well, it seems to me that he thinks that the Hayekian sort of perspective is that there is little to no government, that there's anarchy, there's just anarcho-capitalism and that sort of thing, and there's no morality within the system. And so we need to move away from that sort of approach, which I guess in his view we've been living in for a long time. I'm not so sure about that. To an approach where the government, that politicians should be deciding exactly what the morality should be, how the economy should function, and things of that nature. But unfortunately, he's got the situation wrong. I mean, Hayek was not what I would consider to be an anarchist, where there was no government at all. It was just that there was going to be a government that was as limited as possible to preserve liberty. You know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that sort of thing, more from a classical liberal approach. And unfortunately, this sort of situation where you see some of this national conservatism, which is Josh Hammer is spouting out some of what they believe there in that tweet, is heading in that direction of bigger government, to where they know what's best. They should be able to take us in the right direction. And my concern with that is like, okay, you get what you want, Josh, but what happens whenever it's the other side? What happens whenever there's someone else that's in power and starts heading it in the other direction? That's why every time we must make liberty win. Every single time, that liberty is the answer and the solution, by having less government, more free markets. And when you do that, you really get a better morality sort of situation, because people can be able to choose from their subjective values, what their preferences are going to be in a civil society. And that's what we need more of, Austin, instead of this direction of more what I consider to be ultimately authoritarianism.
I mean, this really is, in essence, it's big government conservatism unmasked. I mean, we've known for years that many conservatives were not interested in slashing government or cutting the size of government, but at least they were interested in conserving the institutions that we had before us, the Constitution and limited government. But I mean, this doesn't really seem to be conservatism much at all. The only difference it seems between them and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders is that these people go to church on Sunday.
Yeah. What are they trying to conserve here? I mean, that's really the foundations for conservatism. Whenever you look down at it, and Edmund Burke and that sort of Burkean sort of idea is conserving those institutions that allow us to flourish in some way. And I think there's a lot of actually good to that. And in many ways, the problem is what I see. What seems to be the case now, Austin, is that they're wanting to conserve what they believe is best. It's not the institutional framework that allows for free markets to work. It's more of a top-down approach. Here's exactly what we believe, and here's exactly what everyone else should believe in the process. And what I really find it's kind of troubling from more of an economic perspective, when you think about the trade-offs, are the assumptions that go into what their way of thinking is from this national conservatism sort of approach. My assumption as a classical liberal, let me just start there, lowercase libertarian, right, is that what my assumption is that government's the problem. That's one reason why I say, in the Fed. That's why I say we need spending limits and spend less overall, and we need to make spending bad again, those sort of things, because government is the problem. And what I see now from this national conservatism sort of movement, it's not just government's the problem, but it could be big tech's the problem, big banks are the problem, big pharma's the problem, all these other things where what's the root cause to these problems is government. propping these companies up, propping businesses up in the process, making regulatory capture where there are the rules of the game that are not the same for everyone. And what you really want in a classical liberal approach from a limited government, it was where the rules of the game are the same for everyone. And so you do that by limiting government, not by expanding government in the process, because then what you have is a situation where government's trying to solve a problem that was first created by government.
This is, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Vance Ginn. He's a senior fellow at Young Americans for Liberty. He was also the top economist in the White House under the Trump administration. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. Now, Vance, the first statement that he made in this one, probably the most controversial and the one that probably sparks the most ire amongst the left. But for secularists like myself, I have to pose a question here that to many Christians I think would seem obvious. But to those of us who are not Christians, it's not obvious. He says that the top priority should be a public orientation to God and ecumenical integralism. So I guess my question is, which God?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am a Christian, and so I kind of get where he's going with it. But at the same time, I think that's where you also need free markets to come in. That we are ordained from our Creator. If you think about it, with the Declaration of Independence and things of that nature of where we're heading in a country. But at the same time, that this is allowing us to have our rights being upheld by government. That's where contract law comes into place. That's where maybe a national defense comes in that allows for security instead of going around and trying to provide order across the rest of the globe. We should be doing more order here, more security here, instead of sending money to other countries. Send more, do things here instead of rolling back big government and regulation and taxes. And so, to your point, where does this come down from the laws of the land to say, okay, what exactly should we be doing? I do think that needs to be some sort of morality, but this is also part of who we are as people. That it's not okay to kill people,
I mean, like, I guess what I would be alluding to with, without being too literal here. I mean, if you live in Dearborn, Michigan, and you heard someone from, the majority religion of Dearborn, Michigan, making these kinds of claims, I'm sure the Christians would be quite upset and quite concerned about the push for statism and big government and a public orientation from God from the majority religion of the people who live in Dearborn, Michigan. I think you know what I'm alluding to here.
Yes.
My question is, and again, I'm not trying to be petty in asking this, but I mean, what separates I guess you'd call them National Conservatives? What separates them from the Taliban?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess a key part of that, to what you're getting at, is, do we want a theocracy or republic?
That is my question. Yeah.
Right. And I think we want a republic. We do not want a theocracy. Ultimately, in my view, right, again, as a Christian, is that the ultimate law of the land is God's law. But that controls me. That maybe sets the stage for what we as a society would believe to some extent, but it doesn't mean that you should have this top-down approach that you would make it to where government is orchestrating what the laws of those from God are. That's kind of a difference there, to where we need people to have what I believe is free will, right? Where you have freedom and liberty and things of that nature, that we get to live in the world that we're in today. And if you're not going to be able to to live a prosperous life, and I like to say, let people prosper, without having that spiritual, intellectual, and material sort of freedom and liberty that's really going to allow you to be prosperous overall.
If you're just tuning in the show, I'm speaking to Vance Ginn. You can text the show 573-319-1586. You tweeted out an article over the weekend from Discourse Magazine where the title of it was called "Do the Populists Have a Point?" The subtitle was "Populism may be a reaction to real problems, but the solutions will come from the very liberal institutions that populists criticize." It makes a really good point, right? Back in, the student loan heyday, Bill Clinton campaigned, in 1992 by promising increased access to student loans. And everybody was really excited about this, right? Because the idea was that it was, we're going to help the little guy. We're going to go out there. We're going to give people more access to college. But all it's resulted in is, poorer and middle class people paying off the student loans of people who go to college and make more money than them. So in an odd sense, populism has led to this twisted form of elitism. It's kind of a paradox, if you will, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think populism, it sounds good. It can make for some good campaign slogans to be elected. And look, whenever you're working from a populist perspective, which I think a lot of presidents do, right, in order to get elected, is that you have maybe tax cuts on one hand to where you're giving handouts to some, and then you're getting big government spending on the other hand. And putting more money in pockets of other people. And really what it ends up being is just a big redistribution scheme. I mean, the government doesn't have any money. We know that, Austin, but a lot of them in Congress don't. They tend to think that there is they do have money, but it's all coming from the taxpayer. So it all must be redistributed throughout the entire economy. It's one of the major issues that I think we have right now in the labor market. Is so much money was redistributed to people, and they have tons of savings now that they don't want to go back to work. And there was handouts after handout after handout. And so this has to be changed somehow. And so then the populist rhetoric is also that, the Fed can just keep spending. I mean, part of modern monetary theory, which says that you can just print, and you could tax it away, tax inflation away, and there's not going to be any inflation from that, really comes from a more populist sort of rhetoric. Right. I even think some of the National Conservatism is coming from a populist rhetoric, because it's giving more handouts to people, trying to give people exactly what they want without thinking about the trade-offs, the cost of what those actions are going to be. It's not just about being elected. It's also about making sure that we can be a flourishing civil society, a limited government that's going to allow us to be as prosperous as possible, which comes through liberty, right? Not through big government, not through redistribution. In fact, those things are the path to serfdom, like Hayek, going back to Hayekian, back to the beginning. Those are the roads to serfdom. If another good book that I think people ought to read from Hayek is The Fatal Conceit, which he really gets into the knowledge problem. That's another big part that I meant to mention earlier, but the government doesn't have the amount of knowledge that's available to the public at large. It's one of the reasons why they will be doomed to failure the more often that they try to take on these big proposals and populist sort of approach, because time and again they will fail, just like we've seen in the past.
I'm not sure if this is breaking news, but I see this is just posted an hour ago over at the Clinton News Network this morning. The headline is this: the Nobel Prize in Economics will be awarded to a trio, including Ben Bernanke, for work on financial crises. He's going to win a Nobel Prize in Economics. It's almost like giving Stalin a climate change award for reducing the population and amount of climate change there. You think Ben Bernanke deserves a Nobel Prize?
Hey, look, I mean, Austin, look, I studied a lot about Ben Bernanke from his book on the Great Depression. He had a lot of good information in there, went along with some of the Friedman sort of approach of increases in or the decline in the money supply driven by the Fed. Basically, the Fed was the problem there, and I agree with that. I think if you look at what the Fed did before the Great Depression and the Smoot-Hawley tariff acts and the subsidies that was put in place by the president, then you really led to the Great Depression. And so there were some lessons to be learned from that. But what happened was during the 07, 08, 09 sort of financial crisis, Ben Bernanke was there. He was the chair of the Federal Reserve. He became the chair of the Federal Reserve in 2006. So he should have seen a lot of these problems going on well before that. And what they forget to do, which I think is so important about the Austrian School of Economics, right, is you have to understand the boom before you can understand the bust. And he may have learned a lot about the bust and how to throw more money at the problem. But what that ends up doing is sets up a situation for the problems that were already there. It just compounds on the problem. And so then we led to lower interest rates for a long period of time. And then when the shutdowns happen, we have this huge financial crisis now. So maybe in some quarters he will be needed or expected to have the Nobel Prize, but I really question some of the things, and even some of the others too, with Diamond there and the other person that I was reading a little bit about this morning. They were really about the financial crises and looking at banks and what they do with banks. But I think what they've overlooked is how much influence and manipulation that the Federal Reserve has. And as we talked about, we ultimately need to end the Fed. One last thing I'll say here is that Ben Bernanke did talk a lot about inflation targeting. He was for monetary rules. So at least until we get to ending the Fed, which we need to quickly, we at least need to have rules in place. Unfortunately, though, he didn't live by some of his own research that he had at the time. So, I think there's probably an argument to be made that he should win the Nobel, but I really question some of this because I like to see a lot of others who are more free market oriented win the Nobel Prize.
Vance, if I could write talking points, then they would be exactly verbatim what you say here on the show. Vance Ginn, you are a senior fellow at Young Americans for Liberty and a great defender of freedom. We appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Do you guys like Vance Ginn?
like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion, delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Displayed proudly on your coffee table, or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Well, Kanye West is in more trouble this weekend, and this time not even conservatives seem to be getting his back. Kanye's Instagram account was restricted following some posts that he made about God's chosen people. He says, "I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people." The funny thing is, he says he can't actually be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jewish also. You guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who ever opposes your agenda. Well, has he gone too far? Let's talk to my next guest. He's a consultant and a member of the tribe, David Whinery. Good morning, David. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Mr. Petersen.
Yeah, glad to have you here, David. So I saw your comments on Instagram. Do you want to kind of like lay out your case? What was your response to Kanye's tweet?
Well, I think I want to get a couple things out of the way. One, that I'm a very observant Jew. I'm a member of Plaza Abad. Those are the Jews that dress in all black, that tend to follow the Jewish religion in Orthodox fashion. And when I saw what Kanye said, I mean, the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, I can't say that I'm a very big fan of theirs. My Jewish affiliations, I guess, more run with Republican Jewish Coalition than they would with the ADL, but it's not that but Kanye got ganged up on by all the Jews. And they even sent people like Puff Daddy out there to try to, neutralize his opinions of the Jews. But I mean, when he wears a shirt that says White Lives Matter, and the Anti-Defamation League says that opinion is somehow hateful, and then they even have the temerity to call Kanye West a white supremacist. I mean, that kind of echoes what they did to Larry Elder when he was running for governor of California. Another black conservative. They call him a white supremacist. And to me, that just reeks of like, are you allowed to have your own opinion based if you don't have if you're a black man, can you not have your own opinion? I know as being a Jew, I have opinions that are sometimes critical of the Jewish people, that are sometimes critical of the policies of Israel, that are sometimes critical of, say, some of our leaders like Dianne Feinstein and Chuck Schumer, that I have no love for at all as far as their policies in the U.S. Senate and, what their agenda is for America.
If you're just tuning in the show, I'm speaking with consultant David Whinery about Kanye West's comments about the Jewish people. Now, one of the things, David, that Kanye said that got him in trouble too was that he says, "Who do you think originated cancel culture?" He seemed to be alluding to the Jewish people, almost as if it was some kind of like, a Jewish conspiracy, if you will. And there's plenty of those going around, in terms of, conspiracy theories. But, what was your take on that? I mean, when he said, when he alluded to the idea that, the Jews originated cancel culture, what was your take on that?
Well, my take on that is that the Jewish people, it's no stretch to say that they have a very influential role in the media. The people who run Google are Jewish. Mark Zuckerberg is Jewish. Plenty of the people that are, run CNN, run MSNBC, run the New York Times, all Jews. And so if you're going to have Kanye came out and say, well, the Jews are trying to cancel me out, it's kind of like what you were saying about PayPal in your last segment. They had to have consulted lawyers. They had to go all the way to the top. I mean, I'm sure, Zuckerberg is not consulted about getting rid of Kanye off his platform, especially someone with 26, 27 million followers on Instagram. I'm sure he's consulted. And so it's kind of hard for the Jews to say, well, we own all this part of the media. We are in leadership positions of this part of the media. I mean, if it were Catholics that ran it all, or any other type of people that ran it all, they would probably be lumped in and said, well, they're trying to cancel me out. And it's hard. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say what's fascinating too, though, is that, if you look at, the people who originated the modern libertarian movement, as many of them were Jews as well. Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and many others. The people who are, you find typically Jewish people, their influence is outsized to their population numbers. Their influence is much, much higher in terms terms of, their influence in the media and in the government and in, the arts, because, because why? I mean, like, why do you think it is that, Israel is such a tiny nation, but they're number two when it comes to patents and copyrights and trademarks behind the United States? Why do you think that is, that the Jews have such a powerful influence beyond their numbers, David?
Well, I mean, you said it yourself, a member of the tribe. We tend to help each other. We tend to work with each other. We're always there to lend each other a helping hand. I know I've done a lot of work with Jewish charities, and I've also received a lot of help from over my course of my life from very influential Jews. And I think that as a people, I mean, even to bring in Louis Farrakhan, for example, even he has said that he wishes that the Black people were as united and can work together as well as the Jews do. So when you have a small, well-organized group of people that are working together on something, I think that is why the Jews throughout history, and especially in today's world, we punch above our weight, so to speak, because we do help each other. Now, some people could call that nepotism. I mean, some people call it, what, favoritism or whatever else you would like to say, but it is what it is with the Jewish culture. But I just think the Jews as a whole, when they do something and they do have a bad policy decisions, and they do have, like, censorship is a horrible policy decision. When you look at a lot of people that were thrown off Facebook and thrown off Instagram in the day, it seems like a lot of their popularity even rose, even after being thrown off the platforms. And then you also look at how Facebook right now is hemorrhaging money. They're firing people. They're laying off people. And I'm sure it's as a result of they've turned Facebook into this hive mind groupthink where if you have an opposing opinion, even if you were to say something like, I don't believe a man can get pregnant, which is a biological, indisputable fact.
Hate speech,
I mean,
hate speech.
Saw Dave. Yeah,
that's
I
a
saw
$2,500 fine on that one.
Yeah, you're done. I did empty out my PayPal account, but I recently saw Dave Chappelle at the Uptown Theater in Kansas City, and he kind of said the same thing. There's nobody in this audience that was not born from the womb of a woman. And how is it hate speech? I mean, I've read, like, in Europe, I think it was in Sweden, some woman who's a leading feminist in Sweden. I mean, she is facing a prison term now for saying that men can't get pregnant, that trans women are not women. I mean, this is simple biology, and they're the ones that are doing all this fact checking. And now they're going to throw people off of their platforms.
Do you think that do you think that, like, the censorship of Kanye contributes even more to his message then? Are you trying to say then that, like, by the ADL and many of these other groups calling, Kanye West's behavior anti-Semitic, and then by suppressing his voice, that it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, like you're kind of proving him right in a way?
Well, I think it does. I mean, it kind of goes back to the old saying of, how Richard Nixon, when he first ran for Congress, the reason he won is because his opponent started attacking him. And you've been in politics a long enough time to know that once your opponent has to start attacking you, you're giving your opponent legitimacy. You're giving them more, whatever you want to say, you're giving them more popularity. You're making more people focus on him. I mean, had there not been the huge hullabaloo about his White Lives Matter shirt, how many people in America follow Paris Fashion Week? I know I don't. I mean, I didn't even know it was going on.
That's a good point, David. It's a good point. Some of our followers and listeners this morning are chatting and sending in messages. They're asking if you have a Twitter account. Do you have a Twitter account, David, or have you?
I just have an Instagram account. I'm one of those people that when they, I don't know if this sounds good or bad, but when they threw Milo Yiannopoulos off of Twitter, I left. I mean, maybe I should have stayed and fought. I don't know.
I know that's kind of my strategy for it, but I can understand yours as well. David Whinery, he's a strategist and good friend of the show, and you can find him on Instagram at The Whinery. That's at TheWhinery, at The Whinery over on Instagram. David, you're a good buddy and a good man. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you very much.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask you today to join Petersen's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Petersen's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits to the chip industry.
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you?
No.
And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. Do not come. Do not come.
Have you ever received a royalty payment from a company that you later oversaw money going to that company?
You know, I don't know as a fact, but I doubt it.
Well, here's the thing is, why don't you let us know?
Washington Post admits that Roger Stone, the man, the myth, the legend, did nothing wrong. Even the Washington Post now admits, according to the National File, that Roger Stone, who has been persecuted more than almost any man that I know by the government and its goons, is joining us on the show right now to discuss the kangaroo court of the January 6th committee. Good morning, Roger. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. It's nice to see you.
Austin, great to be with you.
Yeah, glad to have you here, Roger. Now, you're a man who needs no introduction. Many of the people who have been watching my show know who you are and what you're all about. You call yourself a libertarian. You go back to the Nixon administration. You've always fought for limited government causes, and because of that, you have been persecuted from then until today. But it seems as if the persecution has stepped up even more in recent years, not just by the government, but by private companies who have attempted to suppress your voice on platforms. I wouldn't be surprised if they try and take this show down just for me having you on here today, but we cannot be afraid. We have to go forward and fight against the enemies of liberty and stand together, Roger. What is the Washington Post piece that the National File is referencing, claiming in regards to your innocence compared to the January 6th committee's assertions?
Well, Austin, thanks for having me. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that I was not even on the ellipse on January 6th, did not march to the Capitol, wasn't at the Capitol. An FBI investigation that concluded in March concluded that neither I nor Alex Jones had anything to do with any illegal act on January 6th, or was I involved other than public commentary, which I think is still allowed under the First Amendment, regarding the delay in the certification of the Electoral College. But the Washington Post is still bent out of shape over the fact that I escaped the deadly snare set for me by Robert Mueller and Adam Schiff, in which I was charged for lying to Congress, get this, about Russian collusion. How does one lie about something that we now know definitively didn't actually happen? So because I'm a 42-year friend of Donald Trump and advisor, I have been repeatedly targeted. You're right, I'm banned for life on Twitter. That happened in 2017. Banned for life on Facebook. That happened in 2020. Banned for life on Instagram. Banned for life on TikTok, which is great because now the red Chinese can't get into my computer. It is, so I am limited, unfortunately, to the ghetto of alternative and conservative social media, where I have to punch back against these charges. This is really quite simple. Evidently, I was in a chat room with dozens of other people, but that chat room included Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers, who, as you know, is currently charged with seditious conspiracy. By the way, in America, you're still innocent until proven guilty, and he has not yet been tried or found guilty, but I've had no contact with him. I've never spoken to the man. We just happened to be in the same chat room, and looking back at it, I wasn't very active in it, but I never responded to a number of provocative opinions that he put forward. But they would like to, kind of use this to pull me into a conspiracy where none exists. In fact, Austin, Thursday, the final kabuki theater of the January 6th committee hearing will be focused, on me and also on Ginny Thomas. So look for a cornucopia of supposition, conjecture, innuendo, selectively edited and cherry-picked videos, maybe even some deep fake videos. This is an Adam Schiff production directed by Jamie Raskin, one of the oiliest characters I've ever seen. I thought Schiff was shady until I saw this guy Raskin. It's a hit job, but this is how it works. It drives the crowd on Twitter insane. They demand your blood, and they try to stampede the Justice Department into cooking up some charge against you. I will be ready to respond, but it's no way to live, I must tell you.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if you're just tuning into the show, we're speaking to Roger Stone. You can send us a text at 573-319-1037. 1586. Now, as to the allegations that you were part of some kind of a criminal conspiracy, the Washington Post cited an ex-federal prosecutor named Barbara McQuaid that said that a one-way transmission from Rhodes does not establish that Stone or any other Trump advisors were part of any conspiracy. Essentially, confirming what you're saying there, that just simply by being spoken to, just because, I have a lot of friends, some of them may be oath keepers, and if they say to me, hey, Austin, let's go overthrow the government, just because they said that to me doesn't mean that I'm part of a conspiracy.
Yeah, and it's particularly interesting because Barbara McQuaid was among my harshest critics. She insisted for 2 years I was a Russian spy, I was involved in Russian collusion. She is certainly no friend of Roger Stone. She was really vicious during my trial. People don't really realize this, but on November 3rd, 2020, based on a judge's ruling, the Justice Department was forced to release the last remaining redacted sections of Robert Mueller's report, in which he concluded that he had, quote, no factual basis, close quote, to charge me with Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any involvement in the phishing or publication of John Podesta's authentic and extraordinarily embarrassing emails. That was picked up by absolutely nobody other than BuzzFeed, who brought the actual lawsuit. And they sued the government thinking that these documents would be embarrassing to me. Even they admitted that I was vindicated. But look for that in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or MSNBC or the three networks who vilified me for 2.5 years, destroyed me financially and tried to destroy me personally. I mean, I lost my home, my car, my savings, most of my insurance. My wife was my rock during a 2-year ordeal in which I had to stand trial before a hateful, biased federal judge who made no effort to hide her hatred for me or Donald Trump, attacked Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones from the bench when they criticized her. She didn't believe that federal judges should be allowed to be criticized. A rigged jury. We now know that she hid that section of the Mueller report from us before trial, even though we had asked for it. We were denied it. No, it was a Soviet-style show trial. And it is only my faith in God and my prayer to the Almighty that I'm with you today.
Yeah, you were also the subject of a SWAT raid as well. I mean, fully armed federal agents raiding your home, as if you were some kind of Mexican drug lord or something ridiculous. If you're just tuning into the show this morning, we're speaking to the legendary Roger Stone about the kangaroo court of the January 6th Commission. You can send us a text at 573-319-1586. Now, Roger, you know me. I campaigned in 2016 for the presidency as a libertarian. Eventually that nomination went to Governor Gary Johnson. But I was very harshly critical of Donald Trump at that time. And I changed my mind about him in those 4 years of his presidency because, unlike almost any other president coming before him, he actually did some very libertarian things. You know me as a very deeply principled person, and all I care about are the policies which will advance individual liberty in this country, which is why I was comfortable voting for Donald Trump the second time. And I wonder if you would help me to sort of make a decision here as to the future. If Donald Trump were to run again, do you think that it's a good idea, one, for him to run again? Would you support him if he runs again? And if he was against someone like Ron DeSantis, for example, who's done a terrific job as the governor of Florida, your home state, and somebody who I certainly admire, if this tension arises in the Republican Party, who would you support, and how should we look at that kind of a conflict?
Well, first of all, I think Trump is our strongest nominee because it will take iron cojones to take on the left. I also think he's learned a lot of lessons. I think he underestimated the deep state. I think he underestimated the level of hatred for him among the ruling elite of both parties. I think he's got a very good bead on those in the Republican Party who are in it for the money and the power, but believe in nothing whatsoever and collude with the Democrats. I also think Ron DeSantis is 42 years old, and I'd like him to stay as governor of Florida. His first 2 years were not too good. He found his footing in the last 2 years. He's done a terrific job on the cancel culture, on the effort to indoctrinate our children into public schools with sex, race, and gender lies. He's done a great job on the mask mandates, although we did have mask mandates for 2 years. But I think there's plenty of time for Ron DeSantis. Trump is still dominant in this party. I would, of course, support him because I owe my life to him. I would either still be in federal prison or more probably dead right now, had he not had the courage and the strength to pardon me. So, there's a personal loyalty there, but I also believe he is our strongest candidate. I think he's learned a great deal about who his enemies are.
Roger, you're not only, a political pragmatist, but you're also an idealist in certain ways. And I know you're a man of ideas, not just a man of action. So I'll ask you this question. This is kind of a big brain question, but the current groundswell within the Republican Party seems to be a movement towards a new right, which they call maybe a populist right. Some of them, if they want to be more formal, will call themselves National Conservatives. And quite frequently, these National Conservatives will speak out against people like yourself and myself, people who are libertarians, because they, either one, don't care about our social views when it comes to tolerance, but they also don't care for our views on economics either, attacking people like Friedrich Hayek or Ludwig von Mises or, Ronald Reagan's views on the economy, because they see, the left as someone who they're not going to leave us alone, so we shouldn't leave them alone. And that we should get away from these ideas of slashing government, to get away from these ideas of Friedrich Hayek. Do you have an opinion about the National Conservative movement and their views of libertarians? Is this something that we as libertarians should actively resist, or, is this, a battle with our cousins? How do you see this struggle that's currently occurring within the Republican Party?
Nowhere is this more manifest than in the area of foreign policy. I mean, the war in Ukraine is a perfect example. The folks you're talking about have supported giving billions of dollars to Ukraine for a foreign war where our inherent national interests are just not clear to me. And they may be walking us up to the brink of World War III. I really think there was an anti-interventionist wave in the Republican Party that was really growing stronger. Trump manifested that by saying he was going to pull our troops back from the Middle East. He was tired of the endless foreign wars. Most libertarians, I think, in the Republican Party after, Rand Paul folded, moved to Trump as the most viable option. The folks you're talking about sure look like and smell like rhinos to me. In other words, I think they're trying to redefine themselves. This is my concern about Ron DeSantis. I mean, he's a Yale graduate. He was an establishment Republican in the House. He seems to have gotten religion, but he's also kind of Zelig-like, imitating the style of Donald J. Trump. So I think that we have to recognize that the Lindsey Grahams of this world, the McCain Republicans, they may try to reinvent themselves, but they're the same old sellouts that they were. It's Bush Republicanism, which isn't Republicanism at all.
If you're just tuning into the show, we're speaking to Roger Stone. He is joining us now on the line. Roger, you're the host of your own show called The Stone Zone that I was on this last Friday. It's a great show. It's on Mike Lindell's network. For all of our listeners who are big fans of yours, who would like to catch your commentary and be able to follow you, even though you have been suppressed on social media, where's the best place for people to go to be able to follow you and hear your commentary, Roger?
Thank you for asking. You go to frankspeech.com at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern. Today, Ashley Babbitt's mother joins us because it is Ashley's 37th birthday for a discussion. And you scroll down to Lindell TV 2. So go to frankspeech.com. The first screen you see will be Lindell TV 1. I think there's a rerun of The War Room with Steve Bannon. You scroll down to Lindell TV 2. You can see the Stone Zone every day at 4 o'clock Central Time. I was honored to have you last week, and I'm looking forward to having Ashley Babbitt's mother, Mickey Withoff, will be with us today to commemorate Ashley Babbitt's birthday. Ashley Babbitt, for those who don't know, is the decorated Air Force combat veteran who was brutally murdered, unarmed, menacing no one, shot and killed in cold blood without warning inside the Capitol on January 6th. There have never been any charges brought against Officer Johnny Bird, who murdered her. In fact, he was given a medal, I believe, or an honor. So I'm very pleased that she's able to join us today. Again, frankspeech.com at 4 o'clock Central, where you are, and you can tune in for the Stone Zone. We're there 5 days a week, every weekday.
Roger Stone, the man, the myth, the legend. We are super grateful for your time today. Thank you very much. Keep up the good fight, and we'll definitely have you back.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun. Thank you very much.
Enough yet? Do facts no longer matter? Are lies to be encouraged instead of punished? This is not our inheritance. If truth no longer matters, we will not remain free for long. This is our generation's challenge, to defend our founders' hope that we the people could self-govern if we defend our right to get the facts. And right now, we're building the only defense of free people have. The facts on every politician, every position they held, every statement they've made, every vote they've made, and any cash they've taken. It's the real history on those now pandering for your vote. There are hundreds of young people building our defense right now, and they need your help. We all have our passions, but as our ancestors knew, when events become so foul they threaten us all, we must stand and defend each other. Please, have our backs. Join us at votesmart.org.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
Halloween is coming. The festival of Samhain approaches, and your lazy butt doesn't have a Halloween costume yet? How can you pledge allegiance to the Dark Lord this year and possibly offend everyone at the same time? Visit the AP for Liberty shop and get your shirt today. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. So grab your government is scary tee and tell everyone at the party that you're here to help. Other great seasonal items are available as well, so don't miss out. And visit AP for Liberty Shop today. That's apforlibertyshop.com. Into
Today marks the beginning of a series of scripted segments devoted to detailing the history of the evils of government. My first story details the all-too-common scenario of how some policies with the best of intentions only perpetuate the evils that they claim to attempt to end. This first story deals with a eugenics policy that existed from the late 1800s to the mid-1970s. This is a story of ugly laws. In 1916, a Portland woman called Mother Hastings was told by authorities that she was, quote, too terrible a sight for children to see. The LA Times reported in 1917 that her crippled hands had disgusted members of her community, and she was given money to leave town. She complied, but sadly, Los Angeles was considering enacting their own version of this law that had restricted her access to urban space in Portland. Ugly laws were municipal statutes in the United States that outlawed the appearance in public of people who were, quote, diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object, end quote. That was verbatim from the Chicago City Code of 1881. These laws targeted those with disabilities, the homeless, and vagrants, and were actively enforced and written from the American Civil War to World War I. And they were part of ideas which had become popular during the Progressive Era. That included forced sterilization and the beginning widespread normalization of the eugenic procedure of abortion. Forced sterilization continued in the United States until the early 1990s, and of course, abortion continues to this day in certain states. The first of these laws came about in San Francisco in 1867 to, quote, prohibit street begging and to restrain certain persons from appearing in streets and public places. But the words to describe people as, quote, disgusting objects were common in laws that were spread as far and wide as Portland, Denver, Lincoln, Omaha, New York, Manila, and Reno. The entire state of Pennsylvania even enacted such a law in 1891. Now, the laws were mainly meant to prevent people with visible disabilities from hanging out in public spaces or asking for money. But of course, the wording and function, just like the sterilization laws, gave power and license to those with sinister intent. Of course, being ugly was only a crime if you were poor. There was never any attempt to uniformly enforce the laws. There was only a want to have a pretext with which to remove people from public spaces if their presence offended those in power. It wasn't until the 1970s, after a man was arrested in Omaha for violating an ugly law, that the push started for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Ugly laws would be the pretext for government to step in and do something to prevent these horrible acts of discrimination against the poor, disabled, and sick. It became a legend at that time to spread the idea that the laws had begun in Chicago, aimed at preventing those in P.T. Barnum's freak show from eating at diners or otherwise being in public. But ugly laws had existed for far longer than the famous freak shows, whose entertainers absolutely suffered discrimination at the hands of these ugly laws. Disability activists used stories like these to demand the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and in 1990, it was signed into law by George Herbert Walker Bush. Now, the law, in theory, provided protections to those with disabilities, similar to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But in a completely predictable move, the ADA, as it is known, has been weaponized by governments against the very people that it was meant to protect. In Portland, Oregon, civic representatives now use the ADA to chase off beggars. The, quote, sidewalk management plan was pushed by then-Mayor Sam Adams to create a, quote, pedestrian use zone with a justification basis in the ADA. The claim, of course, is that beggars and homeless people are obstructing passage on the sidewalks, and the ADA gives them the legal ability to persecute the poor and the homeless. Now, in an ironic twist of fate, the law that was passed and meant to protect people like Mother Hastings would now be used against people just like her. Now, it's a natural impulse to wish to have orderly and clean streets, but the reliance on the belief that government can solve the problem that government creates is naive. The laws are aimed at punishing homeless, not providing handicapped people with more space to maneuver on sidewalks, because Portland's sidewalks are littered with sandwich boards, magazine racks, cafe tables, and all sorts of other obstructions. And yet none of those were targeted as needing to be moved, only ugly people who are too poor to defend themselves. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed with the best of intentions, and by bleeding heart Republicans calling themselves compassionate conservatives. And of course, those who oppose the ADA, or who think it even now tends to do the opposite of what it claims, are painted as heartless. Much like the Patriot Act and Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act is named in such a way as to make anyone who might oppose a law out to be some kind of unpatriotic or unfeeling monster. And of course, like the Inflation Reduction Act, the ADA is being used to do the opposite of what it claims to fix. In reality, the government is, has, and always seems to be the true monster and threat to our natural rights.
Hello, my name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake, yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes, you like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bush. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bush blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
any real-world experience.
It's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Good morning, Austin. How's it going?
Going great. Glad to have you here. When I sent you this topic yesterday, I don't have the text message pulled up, but I mean, it took you a little while to respond, but then you said, oh my God, or like some kind of WTF kind of response to this topic. When Megyn Kelly said yesterday on her show that if her husband was going to cheat on her, that she would rather have him cheat on her physically than emotionally. Well, when I asked my wife, Stephanie, about that question, she did not have the exact same response as Megyn Kelly did. What was your response to this, Laura?
Yeah, you're playing with fire there, Austin. I'll actually say that the interview prep for this interview was really healthy for my marriage because Megyn Kelly was talking about in the context of how do you pronounce it? Giselle and Tom Brady getting a divorce. And so they were speculating that Tom Brady there was infidelity going on. And so that was the context of the interview. And so I was telling my husband Jace about this and prep for this interview. And he reassured me several times before this morning that I was hotter than Giselle and that all of his emotional needs are met and that there's nothing to worry about. So thank you for that. But I wonder if my response is similar to Stephanie's, because I was thinking about the question, like, if I had to choose, like, obviously the ideal is that there's no cheating happening. But if I had to pick, the emotional infidelity is bad, but not for the same reason that this person in the interview with Megyn Kelly was suggesting. Like, if I found out my husband was crying with another woman, I would just be embarrassed for myself that I was married to such a guy that would have to go and get his emotional needs met and go cry with another woman. But I mean, that's just sad for me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yes. However, let me just interject on that and say, if he feels the need to cry with another woman, he doesn't feel comfortable with that, doing that in front of you, that indicates that there is a serious problem there because, as a man, it's difficult enough to release your emotions at all. You certainly don't want to do that publicly because of the backlash. I was just talking to my buddy Ian Smith about how men sort of police masculinity, but I mean, women police masculinity too in displaying their, like, just like you did, kind of their disgust with men showing their emotions in a way, right?
Yeah. And that's a fair point. So also if he feels like, and you're right. So in agreement, like if he feels like he can't cry in front of me, we obviously have problems in our marriage. But if he cheats on me in terms plus like the sexual, the intimacy, then that means, and if we're talking about like base instinct here, that means that he's rejected my sexual appeal, which means that he's rejected his desire to have children with me. Like that's what this all is about at the end of the day. That's fundamental.
Okay, sure. It is to an extent, but I think here's the problem. And I know some men will disagree with me, but I think I can safely say in general that it is possible for men to have a physical entanglement that doesn't involve any kind of an emotional attachment. And again, some guy, disagreed with me this morning and, said the opposite, that, he doesn't think it's possible to have a physical attachment without an emotional attachment. I'm telling you, it absolutely is possible. I mean, I
don't think we're in a disagreement there for men. For women, it's different. Yeah.
Are you sure? I mean, maybe for the vast majority of women, but I mean, I have known women who have met a man and within 5 minutes or less, they're having sex with him, in a closet or in a bedroom or something like that at a party, and they literally just met them, Laura. And it's So, I mean, I'm not saying that all women necessarily are like that, but I mean, a lot of women are like that, Laura.
Do you think they're doing that because they need to get off, or do you think that they're doing it because they want like the validation?
Well, what's
I
wrong
think
with
the latter.
well, maybe both. But I mean, even if they want the validation, that doesn't require any kind of an emotional attachment for you and the other person, right? It's just like,
I'm
oh, you're just
saying,
validating. I'm hot. I think I'm hot. I'm hot. He thinks I'm hot. And, yeah, I'm going to get off. But like, really, this is about me feeling good about the fact that the hottest guy at this party wants me.
but that's an intrinsic value for a woman to be hot. It means that she's secure, she's safe. I've got some guy who's attracted to me. He's going to protect me and the kin, and we're going to be good to go through the night. We're going to wake up and we're going to be safe. So that's the kind of validation I'm talking about.
Okay, so all right, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Liberty Laura about one of the most uncomfortable topics we've ever breached on the Wake Up America show.
Oh, I like it.
It's a good one. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. We'd love to hear from you on this one. And the question is would you prefer, if your spouse is going to cheat, I know you don't want them to cheat, but if they were going to cheat, would you prefer that it was a physical cheating or an emotional cheating? Now, when it comes to the emotional cheating thing, I mean, it's funny to think about your man like crying with another woman, but I mean, that's kind of like, the parody of that kind of a thing. What we're really talking about here is like, when we say intimacy, I know people think sex, but I mean, like, there are emotional relationships that I have had with women that never entered into the physical realm, that were, unparalleled depth of emotions and complications and complexities. I don't have any of those relationships now, but I can say that, if I did have that kind of a relationship with a woman now, I would completely understand why a woman would feel more threatened by that than a physical relationship, because like the physical is visceral. So you have like that very strong emotional reaction to it. But I think I absolutely understand what Megyn Kelly is talking about. Maybe a lot of men aren't able to sort of communicate the complexities of the relationships they have with women as much as women are more, vocal and can communicate that. But I think I agree with Megan that is definitely a much bigger threat to a marriage than just some physical relationship, even if it, gives you that kind of a visceral reaction. I mean, can you see why though?
Yes. And the way that I see this, in the context that I see this now, maybe it's my life stage. A lot of my friends are getting married. I'm recently married. This isn't an intimate relationship, but I see this strain happen with husbands, especially new husbands, and their moms. If they have a really good relationship with their mother, there becomes this strain during the leave and cleave process that should take place when a man gets married, and he should leave and he should cleave from his parents, his primary family, to some degree, in a healthy way. But eventually there's usually a loyalty test. It often comes up around kids or wedding planning, if not, before then. And the husband has to decide whose opinion he values more. Is it his mom's opinion or is it his wife's opinion? And that's a big conflict. Because, and I'm a mom to son, so I'm like speaking and like, don't be the crazy mother-in-law in the future. Don't be the crazy mother-in-law in the future. But I can see both sides about how that was hard. My husband and I, we had to set boundaries in place. Be like, listen, when we're sitting down for dinner, just tell your mom we'll call her back. Love your mom. I got super lucky in the mother-in-law roulette.
Mm-hmm.
I have to call her back. She's like a mother to me now. But still, there has to be very clear priorities. And we even talked about this in premarital counseling. Like, this is a recurring issue. And that's obviously not a sexual relationship. It's an emotional one. So yes, I can see how there's tension there.
See, I mean, maybe it's just because I'm a different kind. I'm not like your normal, average guy in the way that I think about things and the way I approach my relationships. I'm much more of kind of like an open heart, heart on my sleeve type of a guy. Chris Morrill over in the Facebook live stream says spilling guts is bad, spilling bodily fluids is worse. Just my 2 cents. See, I just don't see it that way because of, the sort of the value that I place on a relationship with a woman. And when I have this relationship, it is so intense and emotional to me. I wouldn't say spiritual because I don't look at things that way, but to me, the emotional relationship that I have with a woman is so much bigger and so much more important than sex. And a lot of people disagree. Over on the YouTube channel this morning, the Landlord Harassment Channel, that's a funny name, says there's no such thing as emotional cheating. That's a term coined by the left. I totally disagree. What do you think? You can
I
emotionally
disagree.
cheat, right? Yeah. What would you
So let me
consider
tell a
emotional
story.
cheating? Yeah, go ahead. Tell your story.
Let me tell a story. This is good background. Okay. One of the first dates that I went on with my husband, if you can call it that, before we were married, uh, he made me, I was saying the same thing that you're saying. What are you talking about? Very like pick me vibes. I'm a guy's girl. I've had relationship with men my whole life that have been platonic. There's been nothing happening. And he goes, yeah, okay, Laura, that's for you. But for them, it's different. And so one of our first dates, he drug me to his bachelor pad in, not drug me at, but dragged me to his bachelor pad, to be very clear. In Virginia, and we watched Harry Met Sally. I had never seen that movie. That was one of our very first dates. We did not sit on the same couch. I was mad to be even watching the whole thing. But the theme here is that I eventually married my husband because he like calls me out on my BS when I'm wrong. But so he made me watch Harry Met Sally, and I'll never forget this because I had never considered this before. And when we turned the movie off, he said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "Oh my God, everything's a lie." Like, my relationship with men that I had previously, like you discussed, most of them generally, I thought were just these like platonic friendships. But then I think about it and I'm like, oh, maybe there was something else going on their end, not mine. I just think you run the risk. And when you're married, I don't think it's worth running that risk. You run the risk of, and it's not a guarantee, but if you have these deep emotional relationships with women, people of the opposite sex, you run the risk that you'll offend your wife. She's primary. You run the risk that you're going to get in some entanglement with the other party that's not your wife. You run the risk that it'll change for you.
One of the challenges, now that I've been married, our first anniversary is coming up here just the end of this month. One of the things that the challenges that I have is I've always had really good, healthy relationships with women, not in like a guy's girl kind of a way, but I mean, like for example,
Yeah.
like you and I have had a healthy friendship, right? And I have a lot of people in my life that are kind of like you, where it's like, they're women, but we've never dated. It's always been platonic, but it's a very complex and an interesting and engaging relationship. And so now that I'm married, I find myself in a situation where I have to be careful about that. And I don't even, and because I don't know what really the boundaries are for what could be considered cheating. Because like, if I'm having a direct message, a DM chat with someone, like yourself, that, we have this kind of like, we have inside jokes and we have all this, like banter and things like that, yeah, I have that with my wife, but I mean, like every relationship is different. And now I guess I ask myself, like, how do you know when you're emotionally cheating, right? Well, like, at what point is it become emotionally cheating? Is it, if that conversation were to enter the realm of the sexual, then it, obviously is. But I mean, like, how would you even define emotional cheating, I guess?
I think it becomes emotional cheating when it becomes secret, when there's deceit involved. And there was a recent scandal of a prominent Christian pastor, and I'm not familiar with his name at the moment, but he got in trouble because he was Instagram messaging a female friend of his. And there was banter involved, there were jokes involved, and someone got a hold of these messages and tried to call him out and tried to create a scandal. And both spouses on the message recipient's end and then the pastor's end were both like, this is not a scandal. We both knew what was going on. We were aware that they were talking to each other. There was no problem. Cheating is defined between two spouses. And so long as you're sharing that information between the two of you and there's no deceit happening, it's not cheating, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good definition because, like I said to Stephanie when we first started, dating, and then talking about getting married, I was like, just so you know, if you ever want to read my DMs, they are open to you, but I never check hers because, I trust her completely. We're just not the jealous type, but I can see that, yeah, when it starts to be something that you would hide from the other person, that's when, like some kind of emotional cheating is going on. But I guess, in terms of like getting over it, it just seems to me, and I know that you're going to disagree with me on this. It just seems to me that if you want to repair a relationship, a marriage, then like sexually, it's just like it's whatever. Emotionally, it would seem like much harder to break the bonds and to recover from an emotional cheating than from a physical cheating. Do you think I'm wrong?
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think a lot of it also is about life stage. And I'm going to use I'm going to go back to Giselle and Tom Brady to use this as an example. Um, they're going through a divorce. Nobody really knows why. It's not clear. And I was just reading the reports. And again, maybe it's because of my season of life, but I'm looking at it. They've got two kids together. They're ages 9 and 12. There's another kid as the result of a relationship on his end, his ex. And Giselle is the stepmom of this third child. He said he was going to quit football, and then he went back to football. Giselle's a hot girl with twice the net worth of his. She's got staff. She's got everybody. But this is an example that money doesn't buy everything. I think she just wants her husband back. And I think Tom Brady is emotionally cheating with football. And I think there's this term that's thrown around parent circles a lot, and it's called default parenting. It's whoever is the default parent has the biggest burden of child rearing. So whoever the children call for in the middle of the night when they need someone, whoever makes the doctor's appointment, whoever clips the nails, whoever can't take a break, because without them, the children would not survive. That's exhausting. And so he's always doing football. And Giselle's like, I'm tired. I'm 45. I want my husband back. The kids are a little bit older. They're not little kids anymore. So she probably set an ultimatum. I read yesterday she even saged her car. She had like some spiritual healer come out. This girl's done. She's saging her car. She's done. She wants her husband back. If he's not going to be there, she's cutting ties.
Are you the default parent, Laura?
I am in the degrees that are biologically not changeable. So like breastfeeding until my husband can start lactating, that's on me. Until he can bear a child, though the media tells me he can. It hasn't worked yet. That's on me. But we basically run a 50-50 household, and it's awesome. I would highly recommend it.
If you're just texting or listening to the show, you can text in 573-319-1586. We're speaking to Laura Lington. Camellia Petersen over on the live stream says maybe part of this is also partners having the expectation that the other person, quote, completes them in some way. Not sure what you mean with that. You could maybe be a little bit more specific, Camellia. Chris Morrill on the live stream says, I'm thinking of a 4-letter word that was popular in MAGA world, rhymes with duck. Pretty sure we know what you're talking about. Tony Allegra agrees with you and says he agrees that cheating requires hiding. What do you think? Again, send us a text, 573-319-1586. In terms of like, the back on the earlier topic of, kind of like the policing of his masculinity in the sense that if he's crying with another woman, that would be something that you would, look down on. I mean, how do you get Jace, I guess, since we've already named him, how do you sort of like, do you have to like get him to open up to you emotionally, or does he do that naturally to you? Like, because it would seem to me that in order to avoid, emotional cheating down the line, it's probably incumbent on the woman to initiate a lot of those kinds of conversations or to kind of like draw it out. Do you feel like you have to draw it out of him or not?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. And I know that it's not a fun, satisfying answer. And our background has a lot to do with it. I grew up in a house where we did not talk about emotion. We did not talk about spiritual things. We did not talk about any of that. We weren't vulnerable. It's hard for me to be vulnerable in some rights. Like I will come to him at the end of the day and I'll just let it pile up and be like, I'm a mess. I can't sleep. I'm done. And he'll be there for me 100%. He's more of the like, doesn't keep it bottled up. He's a little bit more emotionally intelligent than I am and will, as things come, express them to me, and I'll be like, I get over it. But point about marriage, The whole thing about marriage is that we're supposed to make each other better. So I better in ways, but in this particular way, he does make me better. And we are raising our boys to say, hey, it's okay to cry. If you need to cry, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, well, just be careful, because...
Just don't do it with another woman when you're married.
All right, that's Liberty Laura Lington. Great interview on this show. Laura, is there anything else that you think our listeners should know before I let you go?
So I used to work in Congress. That's where you and I met. Austin was in D.C. So I used to work in the House of Representatives as a communications director. I've since quit that job, and now I run my own political newsletter that's an alternative to binging Fox News and CNN and Reddit for several hours a day. It's a political news aggregation service, email-based. You can sign up at billbrief.com. And you'll get a 7-day free trial, billbrief.com. I gather all the news for you, do all the research, summarize it for you, put in links, and it's all packaged with a pretty bow and is delivered to your email inbox 3 times a week.
Great stuff. Laura Lington, that was an awesome interview. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. We appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate our platonic relationship that we have going for us.
Me too. It's a very good platonic relationship.
It's morning again in America. Our country is prouder and stronger and better.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Forgiving student loan doesn't solve the crisis. Here's what would. First things first, never let it happen again, writes my next guest, Neetu Arnold, who's joining us on camera right now. Her latest article just appeared in The Spectator. She's joining us to talk about the student loan crisis. Good morning, Neetu. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you here. So explain to us your thesis. Why would you, as a young person, not be in favor of student loans? It's free stuff, right?
Yeah, it's free. It's never really free. Somebody is always paying for this. And this is a large wealth transfer from people who do not receive the benefits from a college degree to people who do. And again, there's a lot of individual choices that come into play here when it comes to choosing which college you go to. And that really shouldn't be left up to the taxpayer. I would also say that debt forgiveness doesn't address the root problem of why college has become so expensive. It's also not going to address this problem we're going to have to deal with again in potentially 6 years, around 2028. That's when it's estimated that we will return to the current $1.6 trillion of outstanding student loan debt that we have. So this is not addressing the root problem. And it's also, again, it's unfair.
Al, you were saying during the commercial break that your wife is really livid about this. She's not happy about this whole thing.
Well, because it's inequitable. Number one, she knew what she was getting into. She voluntarily, willingly got the loans. When she did get the loans, she knew that she was responsible for paying them back. And she did pay them back. And she got her college education. The loans have been paid back, and she's happy.
Yeah.
But she doesn't like the idea of taking this time frame, and paying off student debt. And I agree with Neetu that it's very inequitable.
I mean, Neetu, I think a lot of people are justifiably outraged over this. Yes. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Again, it's not addressing the problem. I think what frustrates a lot of people on this particular issue is that we're talking about public funds here, and we're not seeing it put to good use. The federal student loan system is there aren't any checks in place. There aren't checks or balances in place. So there isn't a way to tell whether a student has the ability to repay their loans or finish their programs. And so for a lot of this is just handing out loans without any expected return, and the taxpayer is expected to remain on the hook. And so one idea I have to fix this issue, it's very simple. It's to condition federal student loan lending to things like the return on investment of a degree or the academic preparation of a student, such as those that we see through test scores. I want to emphasize conditioning federal loans on academic preparation specifically, because a lot of the issues we see with the student debt crisis is we have a lot of people that are going to college who may not be academically prepared, and then some of them will drop out. So they are getting all the debt, but none of the benefits of the degree. We also see people who may enter college, they enter a degree with a high return on investment, but then college becomes difficult and they switch to an easier major, which may have a lower return on investment. So again, in the end, they took out federal student loans, but when they graduate, the economic returns are not there. And I think that's the issue here.
Nitu, can you talk to us about what policymakers doing? Have any politicians actually proposed any legislation that might prevent something like this from happening going forward?
Yeah, so the Real Reforms Act was proposed by lawmakers against President Biden's proposal of targeted debt forgiveness. One specific provision that I like in this bill is that it would curb executive authority to forgive these kind of debts again. And I think that's what we need, because the way this decision was made was it's questionable. We don't know the constitutionality of this. I mean, there's a lawsuit right now that's questioning whether the Biden administration could use their executive authority rather than leaving this decision up to Congress. And again, as I said earlier, we're going to have to deal with this issue again. If we don't curb executive authority at some point, it may not happen in the next couple of months, and we need to wait for the results from the midterm elections. But if we don't address this soon, then the doors have been opened for more debt forgiveness. And so again, this could happen again.
You can text the show this morning at 573-319-1586. We're speaking to Nitu Arnold about her article in The Spectator. Hal Dooley is still joining me in studio. Hal, I thought it was interesting, the president, he said that the coronavirus pandemic was over, and yet he doesn't want to give up his emergency powers and authorizations for things like this.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, he can, right? It's the power of the imperial presidency.
And Nitu brought up a very interesting point, very valid point, on the constitutionality of some of these executive orders, and they need to be curtailed or challenged to make sure specifically that they aren't abused. And personally, I think they're being abused right now, or at least stretched way beyond what the original intent was.
What do you think federal student loans should be based on in terms of the criteria for how we should determine who gets a federal student loan, Nitu?
Yeah, so I think first it should be based on a student's academic preparation, just so that we don't have loans going to people who we could reasonably expect they wouldn't do well in school. But the second thing would be the return on investment, the potential earnings over the course of several years. I think when it comes to federal funding, it should go to people where we would see great benefit. That's the point of public funds. We should see public benefits. And an example would be right now we have a shortage in domestic STEM workers, people working in science, technology, engineering, and math. We could see great investment if federal loans just went to those students, for example. I mean, those degrees have high return on investment. We would benefit from more workers in those fields. And so to me, that seems like a win-win situation. That's how public funds should work. It shouldn't be going to psychology majors who don't even end up working in psychology because either due to underemployment or because the field is too saturated.
I could see the outrage from the left on making that kind of proposal. Yeah. That almost sounds like the kind of determinations that would be made if you were a moneylender in the private market and you were making a decision based on the ability of the person to repay a loan. It sounds almost like a free market style solution.
That'd be terrible if we did something like that, wouldn't it?
I don't know about that, Nitu. You're starting to try and apply free market principles to government thinkers, and the horror. If you're just tuning in to the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen, we're speaking to Nitu Arnold about student loan debt forgiveness. You can text the show at 573-319-1586. Nitu, is there anything else of importance on this topic that you think that our listeners should know about it?
I mean, I really wanted to get the point across that we really need to condition federal student loans to outcomes, to the kind of preparation students receive. But I also think people should be keeping an eye out on the current lawsuit that's been filed by the Pacific Legal Foundation. That's going to be in the news. There's probably going to be more lawsuits happening. Now, my view on that, I think there are two things that this particular lawsuit is trying to address. There's one where they want to address the injury aspect. So by by participating in the debt forgiveness program? Are there more harms created? Which in this particular lawsuit, I'm not sure about that. I think that's going to be a very difficult case to make. But then there's a second aspect, which is the constitutionality. No president has ever used their executive authority to forgive student debt. We have used it to delay payments, and there's a big difference between delaying repayments because of a national emergency or war, where maybe a soldier their first priority may not be paying off their student loan debt because they're fighting in a war. But there's a big difference between that and just outright forgiving student loan debt, and the potential precedents it could set if nothing is done about it right now.
That's Neetu Arnold, whose article in The Spectator you can read, and it's titled "Forgiving Student Loan Debt Doesn't Solve the Crisis. Here's what would." You can follow Neetu Arnold. What's your Twitter account, Neetu, so people can follow you there?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is NEETU_Arnold.
Neetu Arnold, her first appearance on the show. How do you think she did? Neetu, thank you very much for coming on the program today. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. Okay, so what did you think, studio audience? Was that good or what? Head on over there. There's a chat feature underneath. The more people who watch it over there, the better, to help us grow the website and to build a strong presence over there. All right, let's get the show on the road. Mocking the police. It's not a crime. Joining us now to discuss a First Amendment case that prompted The Onion to step in and write an amicus brief to explain how parody works. Camelia Petersen joining us live. Good morning, CJ. How are you doing today?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, CJ. So what does this case hinge on? If you wouldn't mind, give us our listeners a sort of brief background on how this case came to be.
Sure. Well, apparently back in 2016, a man created a Facebook page that was a spoof of the Parma, Ohio Police Department. And there are other, and I mean, like, if nobody's seen them, there are other, parody pages of various government agencies, including police departments out there that are hilarious. So apparently this guy, Anthony Novak, created this page, and it should have been pretty obvious because, it included like a job notice that said the department is strongly encouraging minorities to not apply and, advertising a police abortion van for teenagers, warning that, the city had been giving homeless people food, or making giving homeless people food a crime so that they would leave our city due to starvation, and other just like really crazy things. And apparently the page was only up for 12 hours and the police department received 11 calls in that time on their non-emergency line. Nobody was calling 911. So anyway, that they decided that that was not appropriate, and so they arrested him.
So wait a minute. So this Anthony Novak guy, he basically set up a spoof of his local police department on a Facebook page, made all these jokes of these satires like, don't, minorities can't apply. It's illegal to give homeless people food and stuff. And the community wasn't fooled by it, but the police, the reason why they arrested him is because they thought that they were interfering with police business, or what was the justification for the arrest?
Right. Well, they said that he violated some state law that kind of was broadly worded about using a computer to disrupt, interrupt, or impair police services. And it's a felony. Wow. Punishable by up to 18 months in prison. But yeah, he would have had a felony on his record.
Jesus. Okay. So a felony for setting up a Facebook page making fun of his local police officers. So he gets arrested and he goes to trial. What happens?
He goes to trial, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit ruled that, he had the jury. Well, first of all, the jury acquitted Novak. They obviously recognized that this was ridiculous. This was parody itself. But then Novak sued 7 of those police officers for violating his First Amendment rights, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit ruled that the defendants were protected by qualified immunity, which brings up a whole nother can of worms. And they gave a couple of reasons. And basically, the case was presented to a grand jury, and it kind of went on. And so this has kind of gone up the ladder. And now the Onion has filed an amicus brief because they became aware of this and said, this affects us too. So they jumped into the fray, and it is so funny. I haven't gotten to read the entire amicus brief yet. There's like 23 pages to it. But I mean, they're in there saying that, the Onion is the world's leading news publication, offering highly acclaimed, universally revered coverage of breaking national, international, local news, rising from humble beginnings in 1756. So it says they enjoy a daily readership of 4.3 trillion, and on it goes. And it is just, they, make full use of that. Although they have some, they make a serious case in here too. When they talk about, can Americans be put in jail for poking fun at their government? And their point is like, this is a surprise to America's finest news source. And, uncomfortable, because that's what they do. Is their business model is based on, poking their finger in the eye of repressive authoritarian regimes like the Islamic Republic of Iran, North Korea, various presidential administrations. And so this is free speech. And so they are making their case for it. And it's sad that you have to point these things out, because you'll always have some of the very serious people who don't get the jokes. So
Well, I think I was reading in the story here that the one police detective, Thomas Connor, claimed that the parody, that people honest to God believed the parody was the real Facebook page. But then after Novak sued him, the detective admitted that that was not true. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen, I'm talking to Camellia Petersen right now. She's an SON and I'm an SEN. No, we are not related.
Not related.
No, you can text the show at 573-319-1586. Camellia, I'd like to move on to another topic. You sent me this story yesterday about the state of Louisiana divesting itself from BlackRock, this gigantic mega corporation, because of their environmental social governance policies, these ESGs. Do you want to give our listeners a little bit of info about that?
Well, I have just a little, because I haven't done a deep dive into it. Our friend Jamie Marie Pope actually sent that to me last night. She was like, what in the world is going on with this? And so we just got to looking a little bit, and BlackRock's a big investment company, and they, as part of their policy, have these ESG policies in place. And the state of Louisiana said, look, this is going to, decimate us. We cannot, there's no way that we can keep, putting our money and do anything with these kind of policies in place. So they're like, we're out. And I think that's great. I think they're not the only state to do that. I think there have been a few other states that have done that as well. But that's pretty exciting to see, that the state's actually making a stand, publicly like that against those policies, because we've already seen what ESG policies do in other governments around the world. I mean, look what happened in Sri Lanka, the Dutch farmers that just like decimated their living. They can't grow crops. So yeah, it's good to see.
Camellia, the conversation about ESGs has really picked up with the purchase of Twitter by Elon Musk. Now, I was talking this morning about the push by the United Nations and many of these nonprofit groups and their push to try and control free speech online. But a lot of these corporations, their ESG policies aren't just damaging economically, but they're damaging to free speech, because a lot of these companies push for these kinds of censorship policies online. I guess, a question that's related to this is, I mean, how optimistic are you for Elon Musk? Should he take over Twitter for, sort of changing the climate and changing the culture online? Do you have a lot of hope for him to be able to do that?
I do have hope for him to be able to do that, although I will say it's probably not, it's going to make everybody unhappy in some way, because, he may bring back, or he may do policies that bring back, people who have been banned from the platform. But at the same time, he's not necessarily going to, there's not going to be, I don't think, any retribution. And sometimes I think conservatives would like to see a little retribution for, and I understand that.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I don't think there's going to be any of that. I think it would be as it should be. I hope that that's what'll end up happening. I was really encouraged, people just villainized Jack Dorsey for so long, and you don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. And those texts that came out between him and Elon, and, what Jack Dorsey's vision had been for Twitter as a platform, entirely different from what it became, as it started to come under the control of other people. But, when Elon said, what was that tweet about that he said that Twitter was basically the next step towards an X app or something like that, was like everything. So I don't understand a lot of that, but there's enough promise there in the innovation that's going to come with that I find it really exciting.
If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking to Camelia Petersen. You can text the show 573-319-1586. One listener texted in and said they heard Florida and Texas are divesting from private capital. A lot of these entities love to screw housing prices to make them unattainable for young people like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Yet many of these entities are also making very low-cost options when it comes to your 401k or your Roth IRA options. Another listener texted in and says Elon has blown it out of the water. The others will be forced to follow because of market demand. And Dorsey colluded, they says. You can text us too, 573-319-1586. Camelia, here at 8:30 this morning, I'm going to start talking about the marquee segment, the discussion about why American boys are failing at school and losing at life. I had read this article in the New York Post a couple of days ago, and then you sent me an article where Nick Gillespie of Reason Magazine had talked to the author of this book, this Richard Reeves gentleman, whose new book, Of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters, and What to Do About It, chronicles the story of the American male who are now lagging behind girls, not just in education and not just in development, but they're also lagging behind American women when it comes to their mental health as well. You have a strong opinion on this, don't you, CJ?
I do. I think that this is a huge problem in our culture right now, and there are probably a lot of different contributing factors for it. But I was really encouraged to see that, and I'm looking forward. I think they did this, maybe they're doing it this evening. So I don't know if they're live streaming it or not, the interview, but either way, I'm looking forward to watching that and getting the book and reading through that, because we do, I mean, boys are just almost in an impossible environment anymore growing up, because we've gone so far in extremism to, feminism. And it's not, feminism now is not what feminism started out to be. And it went from, rights for women in basic things that make sense to, it's not enough to have rights for women. We must start taking away, rights for men in a lot of ways. And, you're not free to, be yourself. I mean, everything you do is toxic, and there's nothing that you can do right. And I mean, one of the things that he said, I mean, the suicide rates, for men, also much higher. And so I think we have a real epidemic in the country in the mental health of our boys and men, and we need to start taking a really hard look at that.
Camelia, one of the things that I like to ask any of my guests whenever they're on at the end is if there's anything else that they would like to share that they think that our listeners should know. And you kind of latched onto that and brought that up before we started talking. So is there anything that you think our listeners should know before I let you go?
I was thinking about that because, one thing that's been on my mind lately is started sort of with something that my daughter Felicity brought up. She had an assignment the other day where she was writing up a paragraph about a quote from Alexander Hamilton. And the quote was, "I never expect to see a perfect work from an imperfect man." And I thought that is so applicable to, what we see just in our culture and in politics and everything else, because we expect perfection of imperfect people. And I was also, reminded, and, basically when she was writing this, she, had to look at, okay, what qualified him to say that? There's lots of things about Alexander Hamilton that, we don't necessarily agree with or like, but there are also a lot of great things that he did and had to say as well. But, what made him qualified to say that, how does that apply to us and so on? And so, we've heard a lot too lately in the last day about Herschel Walker and paying for an abortion back in 2009. Of course, now he has a very pro-life stance and he's kind of a mess as a candidate. And that's maybe a whole nother topic, but it's kind of this idea that if you do something in your past, you can never get away with that. And we don't give grace to people. Bishop T.D. Jakes said one time that we have a tendency to want the other person to be a finished product while we give ourselves the grace to evolve. And so that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think that as we go out and we have conversations, in our tribalistic culture, politics and everything else, and everything is political anymore, that we, remember as we go out and talk to our friends and neighbors today that they're imperfect just like we are. And I hope we all have room to grow, and let's give them the grace to do that too.
That's a great point. And I actually, I was thinking about something while you were saying that and talking about the expectations that are placed on women versus men. And this might be kind of a controversial question, and it's not supposed to be like a gotcha or anything like that. But I wonder what you think about this. My understanding is that the society as we live it today in terms of gender roles is that women have been freed of all of the old obligations that were placed on them, but all of the obligations that are placed on men are still there. Women are free to do as they please and go out in society and to get a job or have a family. They're free. They're free to choose. But when it comes to the expectations on men, men are still expected to follow all of the old traditional gender roles, be a provider, be strong, and do all of these things as a man. But they're subject to higher the limitations are still placed on them in terms of expectations. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think, in that pendulum swing to, extreme feminism that, that women have taken all of these things where, we're free of all of these, like you said, all of these traditional roles. But at the same time, women still expect men to, most anyway, to, pay for dinner on a date. When you read about what women expect men to do, it's a lot and it's presumptuous, frankly.
If you watch any like red pill videos or like manosphere videos or like anything in that Andrew Tate might appear in for an interview, what you'll see is that they'll go do man on the street questions, and they'll ask young ladies of what they expect of their man, and it will always be like, provider, takes care of them, like all of these old traditional gender roles. But then when asked what they have to offer, it's like, what do you have to offer a man? It's, well, I can't. It's usually just vajayjay. I'm not trying to
look pretty.
Yeah, exactly. But wouldn't that be nice? I can understand why young girls would want that. You're in a sense, you're sort of free of responsibility in a way that men don't really get to enjoy. Listen, if you're a young woman and you're told you can do whatever you want and the world is yours, yeah, you're going to have that. But nobody wants to have responsibilities placed on them. But without some kind of biblical term of being equally yoked in all that sense, we're going to get the sort of negative outcomes that, I'm going to talk about here in just a few minutes. But, we'll continue to see young boys, struggle to thrive.
And I do think a little bit of this is, and this may be a little bit controversial, I do think a little bit of this is women pushing back against that sort of innate desire that we have most of the time to be taken care of. I think there's something, biological to that in terms of just, our evolution and survival when you're talking about gender roles. So I think there is something of that in us that verbally we want to say, no, we're independent, strong women. But at the same time, there's still that factor there in a lot of women. And I think that creates a conflict, and women don't know how to deal with that sometimes. And so they're dealing with it in very unhealthy ways.
It's morning again in America. Our country is prouder and stronger and better.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.